Though the disciples followed Jesus, they didn't always understand what following Jesus was all about. Welcome to Pastor's Point. I'm Dr. Jamie Schmitz. Today's message is from Dr. Robert G. Birt Jr. of Glass City Church of Christ of Toledo, Ohio. His message is entitled, They Missed the Message.
Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all of his benefits. The world moves so fast that we could easily forget where our benefits come from. And I like to remind myself, and I like to remind you, that our benefits come from the Lord. Come meet me in the Gospel of Mark. The Gospel of Mark, chapter 8, and I simply want to read verse 21. Mark chapter 8 and verse 21. And the text reads, and he said unto them, how is it that you do not understand? Jesus says to his disciples, how is it that you do not understand? My subject is entitled, They Did Not Understand. Again, they did not understand. The Gospel of Mark is a part of the synoptic problem. And when I say synoptic, I'm talking about, we know that when we pick up any translation of the Bible, there are four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But the synoptic issue is that when you've got Matthew, you've got Mark, and you've got Luke. John is the cousin that stands over alone by himself. But when I say synoptic, I'm saying this, that when you study the Gospels, you study all three of those Gospels together. Now, they're somewhat different. Whereas Matthew is written to Jews and Mark is written to Romans and Luke is written to Gentiles. So they're somewhat different in terms of their audience, but you can study them together. They have many of the same kinds of stories. And so I have selected the Gospel of Mark. Now, scholars say that the Gospel of Mark is the first gospel that was written. It was the first gospel that was written. Now I need to say this. They were written late, even though the gospels come before the epistles. The gospels were written late. They were historically written late. The other thing I need to tell you is this: that when you read the Bible, this is important, because I believe that reading is fundamental to understanding the Bible. And so when you read the Bible, you have to read the Bible as though it does not have chapters and verses. It was a priest and a printer who put chapters and verses in the Bible. Now, we need chapters and verses, don't misunderstand me, as a frame of reference. But when you study the Bible, you got to read it as though it does not have chapters and verses. And the reason is this. The reason why is this, because you and I don't want to take any text of Scripture out of context, okay? We want to stay within the context of Scripture. Now, when you read the Gospel of Mark, it's a narrative. It was written to Romans. It was written to Christians in Rome. It was written because there's some Latin in it. But it was written to Christians in Rome. And the Gospel of Mark, in essence, is about who Jesus Christ is. When you start reading it, he begins by talking about who Jesus Christ is. Okay? That's his message. Now, watch this as I go through this lesson. The first thing I'm going to talk about is a crisis. And of course, we all can relate to crisis in some shape, form, or fashion. I want to talk about crisis. There are crises in the book of the Gospel of Mark. There are these boat scenes that keep coming up. these boat seams, these storms that keep coming up. And so when you read the gospel, you see teaching, then you see crisis, and you see miracles. You see those three things running through the gospel of Mark. And so you get to chapter 8, and there's a crisis. And here's the crisis. Jesus has been teaching all day. He's been teaching all day. And he says, I've kept them here so long that I need to feed them. I need to feed them. And so so when you read chapter 8, you find out that Jesus takes these loaves of bread, and the text says, he takes 7 loaves of bread. Okay, takes 7 loaves of bread, and he feeds 4,000. And when he finishes feeding the 4,000, the text says he has leftovers. And he had given them this lesson. I told you he will teach them about, he says, be careful about the leaven of the Pharisees and of Herod. Be careful about their teachings, their understanding of God and religion. He says, be careful. And they were trying to understand or determine, what is he talking about? Here is the point. They just saw the miracle, but they missed the message. And so Jesus has to remind them that previously he fed 5,000 and he had 12 baskets left over. Now, in each of these feeding miracles, there were leftovers. There were leftovers. And he says in verse 21, how is it that you don't understand who I am in the crisis? You don't understand who I am in the crisis. You need to understand that I am the bread of life. They're in a crisis. They're in a pandemic. They're in social unrest. They're in political upheaval. They're in a crisis. There are physical issues and economic issues going on. They're in a crisis. And Jesus says, don't you understand? I know you saw the miracle, but do you understand the message? What's the message? It's what we call a Christological message. It is the message that Jesus Christ is the bread of life. See, in the first century, they didn't have utensils. So if you didn't have bread, you did not eat. Hear me clearly. And Jesus uses that to say, you don't understand. You so caught up in the miracle. You're so caught up in but you don't understand. Now, the other thing about the Gospel of Mark, not only is it about these boat scenes, but and teachings about how people react. So the crowds would hang around Jesus because they were amazed of him. The Pharisees and the scribes would hang around Jesus because they wanted to get over their teaching, their doctrine. And the disciples hung around him because they wanted to follow him, but they didn't understand him. They truly wanted to follow him, but they did not understand who he was. And so he comes in chapter 8, and you got to spend some time reading chapter 8, but I'm kind of swiftly going through it. He says, he asks them a question. He comes into, the text says, the city of Caesarea Philippi, and he asks them a question. Who do men say that I am? Now, I want to suggest to you that Jesus did not ask this question of who men, anthropos. That is the whole community of Toledo, the whole community of Ohio, the whole community of the United States of America, the whole world. Who are men saying that I am? He did not ask this question out of insecurity. He did not ask this question out of validation. He asked this question to get to the real question. And Peter responds and says, thou art the Christ. That's in Mark's gospel. Matthew carries it a little further. He says, you are the Christ, the Christos. You are the Messiah. You're the Messiah. But I suggest to you that Peter did not understand. He still did not understand. The disciples did not understand. And so there is this confrontation that takes place, this confrontation that takes place. And the confrontation is this. Jesus says, listen, they're going to come and get me, and I'm going to have to give my life. I'm going to have to die on the cross. I'm going to have to sacrifice my life for the sins of the world. They're going to kill me. I'm going to be buried, and then I'm going to be resurrected from the grave. That is the gospel. That is the gospel, which Paul says that the gospel has dunamis. It has power. And the word dunamis, it's not dynamite. That's traditional interpretation or understanding of that word. No. It's a miracle. It is a miracle when you can take people who live for the devil. It is a miracle when you can take people who have given their lives to the flesh. It is a miracle when you can take people who have lived their lives for the world and they are touched and obey the gospel of Jesus Christ, and now they live for God. That's a miracle. I say get it, you say got it. Now watch this. Watch this. When Jesus said that, the text says, you got to read Matthew chapter 8, Mark chapter 8, got to read it. The text says that Peter began to rebuke Jesus. See, he confessed that Jesus is Messiah. He confessed Christos, but he didn't understand fully his confession. Now, his confession was proper. His confession was true, but he did not understand. Now, watch this. The word rebuke in the Bible is an interesting word in the Greek because it's a word, it is a particular Greek word that talks about demonic spirits. Demonic spirits. And then when you read the text says, watch this. The text says, then Jesus rebuked, same word, Peter. And then he says, get behind me, Satan. That's what he says. He says, get behind me, Satan. Now, I want you to watch this because here is, watch this, y'all. Here is the point of the Gospel of Mark. All right? Here is the point. The centrality of the gospel is discipleship. And discipleship means that you got to pick up your cross. Now, I want you to listen to this. Jesus says, I've got to go to the cross. I think we need to be careful in this world about making the center of our message about health, wealth. I think we have to be careful about making the message in this world about I'm able to speak things into existence. I'm able to, that somehow if I speak things into existence, my life is going to shift. That's not the central message of the Bible. Hear me clearly. The central message of the Bible, the central message of the Bible is about Jesus Christ going to the cross. Paul argues that in 1 Corinthians about how people respond to the message of the cross. He says that the Jews want a sign. That's 1 Corinthians 1. The Jews look for a sign. He says the Gentiles look for wisdom, but God has chosen the foolish things, the simple message of the world to save those who are wise. And that is the cross. It is a message of the cross. When you and I are in crisis, when you and I are in difficulties, when you and I are confused, when you and I cannot experience or does not have the power to change the situation and circumstances in our life or in the life of the ones that we love, we must remember that the center of the message of the Bible in Christology is about the cross of Jesus Christ. So he said, I'm going to the cross, and I'm going to die, and I'm going to be buried, and I'm going to be resurrected. Watch this, y'all, by the power of God. So here's the point. Here's the point. Here is what they miss. They saw a whole lot of miracles. As a matter of fact, in chapter 8, they saw a man who was blind, and they brought the man to Jesus, and Jesus touched him, and then Jesus says, "What do you see?" He said, "I see trees moving," which meant that he could see before, but now he's blind. And so Jesus touched him again, and he could see. And Jesus said to that blind man, "Don't tell anybody. You go, but don't tell anybody what you have experienced." Hear my point. Hear my point clearly. The disciples, the disciples who Jesus chose to become his apostles didn't understand. They saw the miracles. They saw Jesus feed the hungry. They saw Jesus heal the blind. They saw Jesus speak to nature, and storms would obey him. What manner of man is this? Was the question. But they still did not understand. And what they did not understand, and what Jesus was getting to, is what the Bible calls discipleship. Now, discipleship is not simply following Jesus. It's about learning. It's about learning what God has called you into. God has called us into discipleship. Now, I want to read the text, and I want you to hear me clearly. Watch this call into discipleship. Watch this call, y'all. Watch this call into discipleship. The text says, watch this, and when he had called the people unto him, with the disciples also, he says this, watch this. Whosoever shall come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. He says, because if you try to save your life, you're going to lose your life. In order to save your life, you got to lose your life. He says, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? They didn't understand that this is all about discipleship. They didn't understand that if you want to experience the transformational power of God in your life, you got to pick up your cross. You're not trying to run after money and things and material goods. You're not trying to tell folk that all you got to do is think right and you can change your circumstances. We're not trying to tell folk all you got to do is speak right and you can change your circumstances. We're not trying to tell people if you hang around the right kind of people, you can change your circumstances. What I'm telling you today and what I'm sharing with you today, that's what's central to Christianity, to Christendom. What's central to Christology, which is the study of Christ, is that you pick up your cross. You got to pick up your cross. In other words, hear me clearly, you don't run from suffering, you run to suffering. And when you run to suffering for the cause of Christ and you pick up your cross, then God will change your life. He will give you internal power. He will give you inner strength. He will give you the capacity and the ability to handle any and everything that comes your way. That's what Mark is talking about. I will challenge you. Run to the cross. Pick up your cross and follow Jesus. Lose your life. It is a doctrine of substitution. If you really want to live, you got to lose your life in him. If you really want to live, You got to learn how to suffer in him, because that's all that's going to, that's the only thing, rather, that's going to build your faith. Build your faith. When you pick up your cross and you follow him, you build your faith. You won't be alone. He says, in the Hebrew writer says that he says, I'll never leave you, nor will I forsake you. As a matter of fact, in the original, it goes something like this: I will never, no never, never ever, no never leave you. He did not leave Jesus on the cross. Yes, Jesus went through some emotional turmoil and struggles and battles on the cross. But I'll stop by to tell you, God was present, because only God can cause the elements to respond to what Jesus. See, when you read that story on Golgotha, that story of Jesus being on a hill, you see the elements operating. Oh, God was present, but Jesus had to suffer. He had to suffer for the sins of the world. He suffered for the sins of the world. And we must suffer. We must pick up our cross, and we must follow him, because that's what shapes, listen now, that's what shapes our life. Paul says, be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Those are present indicative actives in the Greek, which simply means this: if you are allowing the world to just shape you and to form you, you're doing it every day. It's a part of your lifestyle. It's a part of your norm, that you're allowing the world to shape you and form you. Paul says, no, make a shift. He says, put your mind away from the things of the world and put your mind on the things of God. He says, that's the renewing of the mind. And when you renew your mind, he shapes you. He transforms you. He will change you. That's discipleship. And when you are transformed and you're shaped, you pick up your cross, and suffering, listen to this, suffering for Christ will always be followed by glory. My friends, I'll leave you with this. When I was in the world was shaping my thinking and my actions. But one day somebody introduced me to the Lord Jesus Christ. When I was in the world, I was hanging out with my friends. When I was in the world, I was doing all kinds of wrong. And you know what I thought? I thought it was axiomatic. I thought it was commonplace. Things that I was doing, to me, were fine. They were okay. That's what we did. And then I found the Lord. And I'm telling you, when I found the Lord, he changed my life. I found him, and he changed me. And I had experiences with family and friends. You know, they called me a Jesus freak, but I didn't care. They talked about me, but God changed my life. He changed my worldview. He changed how I think. And I've been with the Lord a long time now. And I stand here articulating, propagating this message because I found Jesus. You gotta, and when you find him, you gotta pick up your cross, because in the cross is where you experience the grace of God. It is where you experience the mercies of God to shape you and form you and transform you into his image. That is the challenge today. I know everything is going on in the world, but let me tell you something. Let God speak to your heart. Let God speak to your mind. Let God speak to your person. And my friends, if you allow God to do that, your experiences will change. God will lift you out of clay and put you on a rock to stay. He will move you out of darkness, and he'll bring you into the light. And as I close again, here are 3 principles that I live by. My discipleship. First of all is faith. Faith is that I trust God. Faith is learning how to walk in the dark. Faith is learning because it's not by sight, it's by faith. Secondly, I have hope. Hope is not just an expectation. Hope is a confident expectation. When you become a disciple, when you pick up your cross, you got faith, you trust in God. You got hope, you got a confident expectation that God will show up in any and everything. And finally, you got love. Love is the greatest, Paul says, because God loved us in our mess. We learn to love ourselves and we learn to love others. May God bless you. And remember this, never look down on a man unless you're looking down to lift him up.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Pastor's Point. I trust this message has been a blessing to you and hope you consider connecting with this local church. To learn more about Pastor's Point, visit WLMB.com/Pastor's Point, where you can send us feedback, request a DVD of today's show, and find a schedule of pastors for this season's episodes. Pastor's Point is a local viewer-supported ministry that couldn't exist without the generous support of viewers like you. If this message has impacted you, please consider making a financial gift today and make sure to send us a note about how Pastor's Point has made a difference in your life. Thank you for supporting us and helping to bring a variety of life-giving messages straight into people's homes through the ministry of Pastor's Point.